Hi, I'm Selena, and I'm here with Ramsey Campbell, who is a horror writer. And for readers who are unfamiliar with your work, now, how would you describe what you write?
Pretty well, I write horror. This is what I've said for many years and what I'll continue to say, but that, by which I mean, the whole range from basically the ghostly, the uncanny, the psychological, all the way up basically to what I like, what for a better term, cosmic terror, the kind of horror fiction that I think aspires toward awesomeness. Whether I ever reach it is a moot point, but that's my highest ambition in what I write. I don't go in much for graphic gore. If you need the violence, I'll write it. But I don't believe in putting it in for its own sake. So I'm toward the subtler, more suggestive end of the spectrum. Put it that way. Tradition of Lovecraft and M.R. James.
Okay, and what can readers expect from your newest book, which is The Searching Dead?
Well, The Searching Dead, it's the first volume of a trilogy, and I've got to go back a little bit and put it into a kind of a context. When I was 14, getting on to 15, I started writing, well, the first stories of mine I ever saw print in any form. I started imitating Lovecraft in a big way and wrote half a dozen such stories when I was 15. Sent them to August Derleth, who then ran Arkham House over in Sauk City in Wisconsin, who was Lovecraft's publisher, just basically for his opinion. He sent me back a very detailed editorial letter with lots of very necessary suggestions of how to improve these stories, and also suggesting I should maybe try and write some more. And the upshot of all that was that he published my first book when I was 18. To my amazement, here I was alongside Robert Bloch and indeed Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, Ray Bradbury, Fitz Leiber, and so on and so on. Now, nearly all those stories were actually written or completed, the published versions, when I was 16. And I created several creatures, entities, and various kind of occult concepts. Rather than trying to just imitate Lovecraft, I wanted to invent my own stuff. But I felt for a long time that, I wasn't really equipped in my mid-teens to deal properly with that material. And, so over the decades, I've been going back and giving it another shot in terms of, how I write now and how I am now. And the trilogy, of which The Searching Dead is the first volume, is I suppose, my ultimate attempt to do justice to those ideas that were, around that I came up with when I was 16. Now, I've got to say, I'm not the only person doing this. I mean, the Call of Cthulhu guys, the Chaosium, who do role-playing games, they've done a whole series of things based on my teenage notion. So, they must have some kind of staying power, I suppose. The Searching Dead, or let's say the trilogy, concerns three characters who in this first volume they're at school. They're only just going to high school. The central character, the narrator, Dominic, discovers that one of his teachers appears to be involved in a very dark aspect of the occult, what appears to be a spiritualist church that can bring your lost relatives back to talk to you. It proves to be a front for using them in very strange and occult ways. And this spreads out into the world in ways that our central trio of kids, teenagers, find out about and try and stop. Now, as teenagers, they don't do a very good job at it, but they're up against something pretty big. As the trilogy progresses, this is set in the 1950s in Liverpool, and very much in my memories of Liverpool as I lived it then. In the second volume, they've grown up and it's the mid-1980s. The third volume, it's something like today, although in fact it was written before the pandemic, so none of that comes into it. Nevertheless, it is a world being invaded by real occult chaos. So it's a big, ambitious thing. It's the most ambitious thing I ever wrote. I'm kind of fond of it, and I think that it deals with various other things as well. I mean, the whole. I mean, a lot of people have thought The Searching Dead does pretty well as a coming of age story, and it's very much about our central character's gradual teenage loss of faith in the religion in which he's brought up, and his broadening view of the world, but also, of course, realizing that something very dark is out there waiting to be combated. Whether he does, you must read and find out, but you won't know until the end of the trilogy.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. What do you think draws readers to these types of books?
Well, that kind, I hope what happens is that, it engages my imagination to write, and I very much hope it engages the reader's imagination to read. And what I think is that, the best supernatural horror, or if you like, the best psychological horror, I think it enriches the imagination. It doesn't just substitute for it. It takes us onto a level we would not normally inhabit. And, for me, that's part of what the imagination is really for, what makes us human.
Hmm. Now, what was the inspiration for this book?
Well, it really was that whole idea of going back to my original ideas and trying them out in a bigger way. In terms of, dare I say, of my maturity, assuming I can be described as mature rather than simply getting on in years. And I really wanted to. I've always aspired to do one story that really gets that sense of cosmic terror that I was always is probably what I love most about some of my favourites in the field, Algernon Blackwood, Arthur Mack, certainly Lovecraft. And so really that was the guiding force. But really, what really makes me write is, the pressure of untold stories and the pressure of unwritten prose. It's all in there, clamoring to get out. And all I can do is try and keep up with it.
Hmm. And what were the steps that you took to bring it from initial inspiration to the final product?
Well, I don't plot hugely in advance. I gather a lot of material, particularly if it's a novel. I'll be spending months alongside whatever else I may be doing. Writing new fiction. I'm going to be accumulating material for the next novel, and I always carry notebooks. And I've got notebooks for the ones I'll be writing later this year by me right now. And when I feel that I have enough material, when basically it feels that it's reached that point where it needs to get out, and once I've got sufficient sense of the shape of it and the general progression of the events, though not by any means a completely worked out plot, because I want to surprise myself in the writing, then I'll start. And there's always that moment where you've written the first line and you're off on this new journey. This is going to be, a year's worth of your life, really, or of mine anyway, as the writer. And I mean, you didn't ask me this question, but I'm going to say it while I think of the answer. That one thing that I always do, one few techniques I've really learned over my career is I always work out at the least the first sentence of the day's work before I sit down at my desk here and start writing, which means I'm not stuck staring at this awful blank page that's staring back at me. So that's a trick maybe for other people too.
Hmm. What kind of research did you do when into writing this book?
Not much at all, because I mean, I basically I'd much rather invent the occult than draw on existing material. If it relates to the given notions of the occult, that's absolutely fine. But I'd rather try and fit them in once I've made my own stuff up, rather than find something and then try and in reality and then try and generate from it. And in terms of 50s Liverpool. Well, no, the research was remembering, it was really like that. I mean, Liverpool in those days, it had been blitzed, considerably during the Second World War. And so you had acres, well, indeed, whole districts, which were just, walls of houses and, fallen roofs and frontages with no houses behind them. And you could walk through those for hours, which I did actually in my teens. They were just a place that I ventured into, partly on the way to going to the movies, actually, because in those days there were so many suburban cinemas. So all that memory of the ruins Liverpool, which figures quite strongly in this book, that's what I'm drawing upon. But research, I didn't really need to do that.
Mm-hmm. What about your other books? Do you have any favorite research stories?
Well, not so much research stories, maybe as generation stories, if you like. There's always the old question of, where do you get your ideas? And there are many possible answers to that one, including the funny ones. I mean, Harlan Ellison always used to get them through the mail in a jiffy bag, he used to say, or words to that effect. But no, I've got a better one for you than that. As I've said, I think, oh no, I haven't said this exactly. I love the movies. For a long, long time, I reviewed movies for the local BBC radio station. So I would go and see them in the morning, go to press shows, and I would see them, before they opened to the public. Now, which is a bit beside the point, but anyway, one morning I went to see, now I think it's Rocky 3, actually, where, Rocky Sylvester Stallone, has lost his title at the end of the previous movie, goes to Apollo Creed, whom he had beaten, to get the title, and says, will you help me train up again so I can get my title back? Apollo Creed says to him, yeah, I will help you, but you've got to promise me something, and I won't tell you what you've promised till after you've got what you wish. Now, at that point, sitting there in the dark, I thought, there's another story in this, there's another way of taking this. And as I say, I always carry notebooks. And for about the last 40 minutes of that movie, I spent basically just using the light from the screen, scribbling ideas down. And by the end of the film, I got the complete outline of a new novel called, well, it was ultimately called Obsession, not my title, but the publisher said that, they persuaded me that would work as a title. And the idea is that in this case, it's 4 teenagers, all of whom appear to have insurmountable problems in their lives. They get a kind of occult promise that one of them picks up, that, in which case the deal is, the price for what you wish is something that is of no value to you and which you may regain. So, okay, they all make the wish, though they don't all of them believe in it by any means. Everything they want comes true, they're not the way they particularly wish. But then 25 years later, the debt is called in. Now, things that are of no value to you when you're 15 are are of considerable value to you when you're 40. All that came out of one line of dialogue in a Sylvester Stallone movie.
Okay. What was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out The Searching Dead?
I don't know. There was much of a challenge, to be honest with you, except that whole business of, I suppose, since I was writing it with no roadmap, as they say. There's always that moment in writing that kind of a fiction where you find yourself stranded out in the middle of nowhere with no real idea of how you got there, and certainly no idea of where you're going to go next. And that is pretty panicky, or it can be, but I've got used to it by now. And what I find is that something that I've written early on in the book that appeared to me at the time to be no more than a bit of background detail, maybe just something to, to make the scene more real, now proves to be the seed of the development I need to go on with the book. And I believe this, I suppose what I would call this is a kind of, organic growth of a novel. And if that's working right for you, then the solutions to problems you may encounter in the writing, you've laid down without actually knowing they were there until you need them. I guess that's a challenge, but so far I've overcome it, and I feel my attitude these days, this is positive thinking, guys, is when you see it, I used to think when I saw a problem in my novel, when I thought, oh my God, I've got that wrong, I would panic. These days, I tend to think, well, if I see a problem, that means I'm on the way to solving it, and that's how I face it these days.
Did you realize that it was going to be a series of books, or?
Oh yes, very much so. In fact, it was my old friend Pete Crowther, who runs PS Publishing, which is a great independent press here in Britain, who actually published the limited edition of the trilogy, who persuaded, he kept gently chivying at me saying, somebody should write a horror trilogy and it ought to be me. Well, actually, I would actually point out that Jeff Vandermeer, he did the Southern Reach trilogy before I got mine going. So, he was first and very fine it is, folks. So go and buy it and read it. So I wasn't the first, but I hope mine's pretty good too.
Is there any particular character that you really loved or that you really hated?
Not so much hated as was certainly very daunted by Christian Noble, who is the adversary at the center of this first volume. The guy who turns out to run this surreptitious, clandestine, occult church in the middle of a derelict district. Yeah, he's a decidedly dark character, but even he's driven by forces he doesn't quite understand and can't quite control. And his family becomes increasingly daunting because his young children and then his young grandson, even at at preschool age, are unnervingly articulate and intelligent and clearly have occult knowledge that most of us would prefer not to know. So I'd hate no, but find unsettling, yes. I hope
Uh-huh.
it does too.
Uh-huh. Now, do you normally, so you plot your stories ahead of time. Do your characters
No, no,
often,
no, no. I don't plot them ahead of time. But I sort of think them through ahead of time.
oh, okay.
Plot is not really the word I would want to use because it's not that tied down. It's more following the general flow of events, if you like. But they will lead to other events I knew nothing about. I don't want to have a preconceived plot into which I would have to try and shoehorn them. I'd rather
Hmm.
take the journey and see where it leads.
Okay, so do your characters kind of often let kind of let you know what the direction of the story is going
Oh, very
into?
much so. Yes, they know. They know more than I do. They know
Yeah.
better than I do. So I trust them. Otherwise, I can't trust anybody in the writing. Read
Okay.
them all myself.
So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, there's a new novel coming out in June actually called Somebody's Voice, which is about the impermanence of memory and even of personality. I mean, it's a psychological novel. Now we've decided. I mean, well, I wasn't sure. My publishers feel it's not horror. It's a psychological suspense novel, if you
Hmm.
like. So that would be a sort of well, it's not the only such thing I've ever written, but it's probably the most radical. And right now, I'm working on a new supernatural novel called
Hmm.
Fell Stones, just one word. It's the name of a little village in England. It's also, though, the name of the 7 stones on the village green that have fallen from somewhere else and have the qualities of otherwhere. And well, I'm just working on that right now, and rewriting is one of the things I most enjoy, actually. I mean, there was a time, that I used to take the view that I wanted to salvage as much of my first draft as possible. These days, I take the view I want to improve all of it as I possibly can. So, and the more I change, the more I get rid of, the happier I am, which may sound perverse, but there you are. If you're not perverse, you're not a writer.
Uh-huh. Are there any times where you've written a book and you've wanted to rewrite the book after it's been printed?
Yes, all the time, all the
Oh,
time. But not just a book, but a short story. So particularly some of those early short stories, I suppose. But yeah, whenever I go back and reread stuff of mine, I think, oh, I should have done it that way. I should have fixed that. I should have left that bit out. I should have expanded that a bit. And I mean, some of my early short stories, particularly. I often think, I'm sometimes tempted to take them apart and start again, but they're too far away. I'm too far away from them. If I started redoing them, I think they would lose whatever they've got. And the stuff that I think, I like the good bits enough to wish the rest of it were much better. And yet, people like, I don't know, Steve King are fond of them. So maybe I'm doing something right after all.
I think so. Now I have a number of questions about being a writer.
Okay.
What's your favorite part of being a writer?
Oh, surprising myself, actually, I suppose would be the word, or the phrase. Whenever I come to my desk in the morning here, I want to write something I didn't know I was going to write until I wrote it. And, turns of phrase I didn't know I had in me, ideas I didn't know that the story itself will generate, and things about the characters I didn't know. So yeah, surprise is the watchword, I think.
Okay, on the whole writing and publishing process.
Yeah.
Okay, and what do you think has been the your greatest lesson that you've learned in your writing career?
Well, for me, and I don't want people to take this as being some sort of thing that I'm saying you should do if you're a writer. Not at all. Because I mean, it's, try and see if it works for you. Okay, but I am one of these people who write every day. And when I'm writing a new story, a new novel, say, once I started the first day, that I will go every day without fail, 7 days a week. Christmas Day, my birthday, sure, yes. And I'll start. I'm here at the desk, well, certainly well before 7 in the morning, more like around 6 in the morning actually. And I'm certainly working on what I'm going to write by 6. And so I suppose that is also something, working on, generally speaking, working on the day's work before I even get to sit down. So not just working out the first line, but there'll be, phrases I'm going to put in, images. In fact, these are things that wake me up in the morning, basically. They're the things that get me out of bed. And the need to write those down before I forget them because I'm going to want to use them today. So yes, basically a routine, and look, I know this is a privileged position, believe me, but I can afford to work full time as a writer. I didn't used to, way back at the start of my career. It was 11 years before I did go full time. Another 5 of those before I started making a living. So luckily, my wife Jenny, who was the best thing in my life, let me say, in all sorts of ways. But she supported us. She was a teacher for 5 years. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now.
So, what piece of advice would you want to share with other writers?
Well, since I wouldn't say necessarily use that, use my schedule because it may, but try it, see if it works for you. If you can, and obviously if you're not working full time, you can't. If you've got a day job, it's not that simple. But if you can work, maybe write something every day while you're writing a new piece, maybe that will work for you. So I suppose really, this is a bit of a kind of a vague recommendation, but I suppose that it ultimately is find the method that works for you, and read how other people do it, see if that will work. If it doesn't, try another one. I would say, I think it was all Robert Heinlein, I'm sure he's not the only person to say this, but it is one thing certainly, always finish what you write, and don't get distracted by this new idea you've got, which is so much better than what you're writing now. Because once you try and work that one, it'll feel like just another damn task, So the new ideas are the will-o'-the-wisp that you mustn't follow till you finish what you're writing now. So finish one piece, and this is me again, always finish one piece before you start another. Now, I've occasionally gone against that, but it's not something I recommend. But again, other people may find it works for them.
What do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
I think for me, basically, certainly not getting ideas. I've got more of those than I know what to do with, and I probably will have notebooks full of them when I pop off to the whatever it is going to be, the convention in the sky. Meet all the guys I used to know. But I think it's got to be, particularly in terms of a novel, it's that ghastly limbo where you don't quite know what the characters are called, or what their jobs are, or what their relationships are, or where they live, or exactly what the situations are going to be. And then gradually that stuff somehow comes together, and you come out of the the purgatory that is putting an idea, developing an idea to the point at which you could write it, and then you're beginning to get the grasp of it. So yeah, that some of that sort of that strange undefined place where nothing seems to have been defined yet. That's where the challenge really lies, I think.
Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that might have helped you in your career?
Well, in Britain, the Society of Authors certainly is worth joining. Not because they all sorts of professional advice if you need it on contracts and the like. So yeah, you're definitely well off with those. There's also, more specifically for folk like me, there's the Horror Writers of America. I beg your pardon, Horror Writers Association. It was Horror Writers of America, but they let us limeys in as well, so they have to change the name. And they again will, they can be a lot of use to you, not least in terms of anthologies that you can contribute to, but professional advice generally. So yeah, those are the two I would certainly commend to people. Yeah, I'm members of both of them. Me.
Okay. Now I have questions about you. What, as a person, what is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Well, it's a good question because I'm not sure what they don't realize. you see, friends realize nearly everything. So looking at me, you can probably tell I'm fond of my food. So that an educated guess would be made by anybody. So that can't be it, can it? I love what, for want of a better word, classical music, by which I mean, music from the Baroque onward all the way to present day. People like Thomas Adès and so forth and so on. And again, a lot of people will know that. I love the movies. Well, that's fine. Okay, here's one maybe that people wouldn't spot in case, since they will know me for horror. Um, I mean, I love the cinema. I love horror films, but my 10 favorite film list has no horror films on it. So that might be a tiny surprise. I mean, it does have things like Singing in the Rain and Letter from an Unknown Woman and La Grande Illusion and the Laurel and Hardy movie. It varies from day to day which that would be, and Bringing Up Baby with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. But it doesn't have any horror movies. If it did have one, it would be Night of the Demon with Dana Andrews, that great black and white horror film from 1957, which I love. That's my absolute favorite horror film. It doesn't quite get into the top 10 favorite films of mine.
Ah, okay. And what question would you do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would the answer be?
Oh, I suppose, why should we take horror seriously, horror fiction seriously? And I
Ah,
would say because it enriches the imagination, because it has a very honourable literary tradition, and to be honest, I'm trying to be part of that. And I think it has enormous range. I've still not found the edges of it, and I spent most of my life trying to do so, but I hope I never do. But I think really the best of it is literature, and deserves to be regarded that way.
okay. What are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for the hobbies and things that you love?
Well, I think I partly answered that, but I'll do some more on that. Sure. Well, basically it's again scheduling. I mean, I say I start about 6 in the morning. I'm usually through by mid-afternoon, and then Jenny and I will pretty certainly watch a film on disc, on Blu-ray, on our home cinema system. And then with luck, I can fit in a bit of music before dinner, and then we have music on disc with dinner as well. So that's the best way I can fit it in. But of course, there's also reading, and ultimately, the implication of your question, the underlying suggestion of what you're saying is quite right. I haven't enough time. I'm surrounded by unread books and unheard music and unwatched movies, and I probably never come to the end of them. But then that's why you keep on watching, because there's always something out there worth doing that you haven't done it yet.
Hmm. And what are some of your writing related hobbies and crafts and additions,
Well, reading basically,
addictions?
but reading very widely. I mean, I mean, this is not true just of me, but I think most writers in whatever field, you don't read just in your own field. You read way outside it as well. And I've always drawn upon, the breadth of fiction and non-fiction, that I do read, to try and bring, techniques and so forth in from all over. Um, and so I suppose that would really be it. I
Hmm.
suppose the other thing that I've left out, which it's not writing related, and yet somehow it's often a stimulus, is we do like to go out walking in the countryside a lot. I mean, it's a bit restricted now because of the lockdowns and so forth, but that's something we do a great deal of, and we're very lucky here because just near Liverpool, which is we live just across the river from Liverpool. We have all sorts of woodland and sandstone ridges you can go and walk on, and lakes you can walk beside and so forth. So we're surrounded by bits of countryside, maybe half an hour's drive, certainly no more than an hour's drive away. So we're very lucky where we are. And we also like, again, at the moment we can't, but we love going over to well, particularly Greece, the Greek islands we're very fond of. So we try to visit one of those a year. And Italy we love, but America we love, and we've often been there. So that's the one thing we're really missing right now, but I hope for not much longer, is traveling.
Hopefully.
Of course,
Yeah.
that very much comes into my writing as well, because places I've been generally will figure sooner or later in what I write, and often enough they'll be the inspiration for something that I write.
Hmm. Okay, what does your writing space look like, and what do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
Well, all I really need to have around me is what I'm editing really, and now I always write longhand. The first draft is always written longhand in exercise books with pen and ink, basically just a basic fountain pen, a sort of basic Parker pen, and I'll always leave the left-hand page blank for any immediate or revision, second thoughts, that kind of a thing, and then let's say a short story, or let's say a novel. I'll finish it, the first draft. It then gets put away for some months. I'll then come back, reread it, at which point I'll see a lot that's wrong with it, and not really see how to fix it. But I'll know that things are wrong, and then I come to the actual rewriting, which is onto the computer, and a completely different set of sort of mindset will come into play. I become, tremendously ruthless, and I will really cut as much as I think I said earlier. I'll cut as much as I can and change as much as I can, and that's great fun. So the process overall for a novel, it takes about a year from start the first line of the first draft to the actually sending off the document to my agent. The completed rewrite that I will have done myself, from my on my own, sort of my editorial self will have weighed in on it. The writing space. Well, I'm at a desk here right now. I'm in my writing space as I speak to you. And as I say, I look out the window and I can see across the river, actually the River Mersey. And if I look in one direction, I can actually see the famous Liverpool waterfront with the liver birds and so on. Although there's so many sort of high rises on there now, and tower blocks and hotels, it's becoming increasingly crowded. Some would say cluttered, but there you are. But the recognizable buildings are still there, and that's really all I need. Now, interestingly, because Steve King, he's not the only person to say this, but I'm aware, Steve, that he says you don't want a window in front of you, you want a blank wall in front of you, which is how he does it. Me, I like to be able to see, if I look up, I can see the open sky, and which is a constant source of pleasure, always changing. And while it doesn't directly reflect on what I'm writing, the skyscapes may very possibly come into a description of where the characters are, and it might just be what I'm looking at right then. It might not as well, but that sort of just sense of space and distance and something out there beyond. I wouldn't be without that. So yeah, I suppose I do need that to write. But I can write if I have to. I can just go and write because as I did say earlier, that when I'm writing 7 days a week. So if we go away on holiday and I haven't finished what I'm writing, it goes with me, and I write in the hotel or on the balcony or wherever it will be. Just very occasionally, and this is really frustrating. We've been staying somewhere where there isn't enough space to work, and that really does, make me edgy until I can find somewhere I can do it. But we avoid that as much as we possibly can.
Do you prefer silence, or do you like music, or
I'm basically a silence person. Yes, I mean I used to like listening to music, baroque. I mean something nothing too demanding. I mean some baroque music, let's say. But I mean if it becomes too complex, then it will tend to take me away from what I'm writing. So these days, no, I'll save the music as my reward for later.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have any favorite foods or drink?
Now you're
They,
talking.
I can see you've been drinking coffee or tea.
Well,
Must be
tea right now. Yes,
tea.
that's the one drug I'm addicted to for writing is tea. Lots of cups of tea, particularly when I get up in the morning. But in terms of when not writing, food, gosh. Well, my wife is a great chef for a start, so any amount of the things that she does. So she does great Indian, for instance, and I'm very fond of that. But we're very fond of both of us actually. So Greek, Turkish, Italian for sure, Creole. I mean, we love New Orleans, one of our favorite places to eat. We would need to go back there soon, I think. But what am I leaving out? Oh, Chinese. Szechuan Chinese in particular. We're very fond of that. There's quite a lot of that around in Britain these days, luckily. But yes, so really anything that's good. The only thing, the one thing I will never let pass my lips again is donkey sausage, which I once had in Milan, which is a local specialty, and you don't want to know. It's like game that's been too game basically, and I'll leave you to let your imagination run riot on that. But no, that was the only food I think I've ever had that I would rather forget about. And as for drinking, well, wine with dinner, yes, you bet. Red or white, we tend to have both. Yeah.
I have one of those. We'll never touch again in Paris. Had veal brains.
Oh, yes, gosh, yeah.
That was it. Are there any particular foods or drinks that you have to have with you when you're writing?
Oh no, except for cups of tea. Cups of tea, yes,
Cups of tea.
sure, but that's it.
Okay. A lot of writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions with them when they're working. And do you have any of those? And do they help or hinder you?
Not in the sense that you mean, no, I haven't. We haven't had pets really for a long time. We used, oh, I'll tell you what, before we had children, because then it became a question of.
Oh, those are good pets.
No. They've had pets. They had pets, but before we had the kids, what we did have was a free-range house rabbit, who was hugely intelligent, and I think rabbits are very underrated. And we had a little black and white called Flopsy of the Beatrix Potter, and she was remarkably intelligent and clearly communicated with us in all sorts of different ways. I'll give you one instance. She eventually had a litter, and when Jenny was teaching, so Jenny got they went to trusted families, the various babies. But while they were still in the house with us, there were 6 of them in a big kitchen in our old house that we then had. And they were running around the kitchen one day, and Flopsy came up to me. All of a sudden, came up to me, and I give you my word, I'm not exaggerating this at all. She seized my trouser cuff between her teeth and dug her heels in and dragged me across the room. Literally, just dragged me all the way across the room. And when it turned out to be as one of the little ones had gone under the fridge and couldn't get out again, so I had to tip the fridge up and let it out, and it was safe. But that was how intelligent she was and how well she communicated. So that's a rabbit for you.
Wow.
But these days, sadly, no, we don't have any pets in the house. You might say I have an uncanny companion because the room, not behind me directly, but the room next to this one up here on the 3rd floor is haunted, and various people have encountered various different things in it. But I don't have any problem with that. So, and it sees off the burglars. So why should we worry?
Mm-hmm.
Except for the ghost, we say.
Wow, there might be a ghost rabbit there too.
You never know.
Yes. Oh, wow. Now I just have two more questions for you.
Okay.
One is, where can people find your work besides Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, although they should check here first?
Absolutely, they should. Yes, you go to Annie's. Well, you can't go just, you can go pretty soon. So go to Annie's and find them there.
Yes, and just a little plug for us. We do have a mail order, and so you can order books from us by sending email to orders@anniesbooksworcester.com, or you can call us at 508-796-5613, and you can get all of Ramsey's books. Excellent. Well, as many as we can. Yes. And where else might they be able to get your books?
Well, I would suggest really, if they don't get them from you, maybe direct from the publishers. So Flame Tree Press is my mass market publisher, And in Britain, it's PS Publishing who do the limited editions, which a lot of short story collections of mine, and also collections of non-fiction that I've been doing. And oh, here's an answer to that question you asked me before. I've got another answer. What is something most people don't know about me, probably, that they will soon? I'm writing a study of the Three Stooges.
I'm sorry, what?
Study of the Three Stooges, the movies of the Three Stooges. I'm writing a book about them. So that's a surprise to some. And PS will be doing that one. So there you are.
Ah, okay, great. Next question, the last question I have is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Well, it's very kind of you to ask. Well, you'll find me on Facebook. I am indeed Ramsey Campbell on Facebook. And you can find me on Twitter as well. And I'm Ramsey Campbell 1 there, with the 1, the number, the digit, Ramsey Campbell digit 1. And, you know, come and follow me. Come and say hello if you like. And very kind of you to have me.
Oh, well, thank you very much. This has been great. I really enjoyed speaking with you. And if you ever do get back to the States, we'd love to have you come and visit our store.
That's what I'll do if I possibly can. Thanks for having me, Selena.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And we will hopefully be speaking with you again.
Hope so. Bye,
Okay.
guys.
Bye.